Good morning.
Morning.
It's good to see you all here this morning. We will be in John chapter 4 this morning. If you'd like to open to the book of John, John chapter 4. I am really excited. I don't know about you, but if you were here in this past week when Rob Whitaker was with us and he came and he brought the School of Evangelism that we just kind of started on last week, it was very motivating to me, and it was very exciting to think about the potential and the possibilities that we can reach for together in order to do what really is, we know, our primary mission, to reach the lost souls. And he was here last week, and if you felt like me, it was kind of a whirlwind, wasn't it? He covered a lot of information very quickly, and that's on purpose, because he's only here for a very short amount of time, to give us kind of a big picture of what it could look like in 3 months or 6 months or a year down the road for us. But the training really has just started. And so together, we're going to go through some of those things again, but we're going to go through it a lot slower and a much more, I think, comfortable pace for us. No one expects that any of us have retained everything that he said last week. I certainly haven't retained everything that he said last week. And so we're going to go through these things again together in a much slower pace. And today, we're looking at how to reach the lost like Jesus did from John chapter 4. And so Rob has left me 17 points from John chapter 4, but we're not covering all 17 today. We're only going to do 5 of them today. These points from John chapter 4 on reaching the lost like Jesus did, they are simple and they are easy. In fact, they are so simple and easy that they are things that you could start today. You could go home, and if you see your neighbors, or if you run into friends, or even strangers at the grocery store, or wherever that you go this afternoon, you could begin to put these things into practice today. And so if you have pen and paper, let's write these 5 points down. And in particular today, we're going to be focusing in the first 9 verses of John chapter 4 on how to start the conversation, just how to even initiate a conversation in the same way that Jesus initiated conversations, how to begin talking to someone like Jesus did. And it starts in John chapter 4 and verse 1, and it says, "Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus made and baptized more disciples than John, though Jesus himself did not baptize but his disciples, that he left Judea and departed again to Galilee. But," verse 4, "but he needed to go through Samaria." Now, at the beginning of this is kind of answer the question, why would we start a conversation like Jesus did? What's the reason behind starting a conversation like Jesus did? And the answer is because of the value that God places on souls. Because when God sees a person, he sees a person who needs salvation. He sees a person who is struggling and lost and overwhelmed and drowning in the sin that tempts all of us. And so because of that, we want to start conversations the way that Jesus did, to give people the best possible chance of being open to the gospel, of being receptive to the gospel. And so in verse 4, we see that it says he needed to go through Samaria. Now, he didn't need to go through Samaria because there were no other paths to take. That's not why. In fact, there was a different path that everyone else took, a more common path. Now, it was out of the way, and if you picture Judea, and just think of it this way, picture the U.S. map in your head. You're kind of familiar with how the U.S. is shaped. Judea, just put it in your mind in the place of Texas. Put Judea where Texas is. And it says that he was going to go north to Galilee. And so, in your mind, just put Galilee in your mind where North Dakota is, up there by Canada. Now, of course, in the U.S., that's actually a much farther distance than Jesus traveled. But, just for the sake of illustration, Judea is in Texas, Galilee is in North Dakota. Now, if you're going to go to North Dakota, how do you go? The easiest, the quickest path, straight up, right? You're going to go through Oklahoma, you're going to go through Kansas, you're going to go through Nebraska and South Dakota until you get to North Dakota. But that's not what the Jews did. the Jews would go and they'd cross the Jordan River. So let's just say they'd go and they'd cross the Mississippi. Then they'd climb north on the other side of the Mississippi, and then they'd cross back over the Mississippi. That's pretty out of the way, isn't it? Like that, if you're going to North Dakota, that's a very scenic route, you might say, to get to North Dakota. And the reason they did that is because right about where Kansas is, that's Samaria. And the Jews hated the Samaritans. And so Jesus didn't need to go through Samaria because there were no other paths. He could have taken the more traditional out-of-the-way path. He didn't need to go through Samaria because he was in a hurry. In fact, later on in this chapter, he's going to change his plans and stick around for 2 days. He wasn't in a rush, and there were other ways he could have taken. He needed to go to Samaria because there were souls there that needed to be saved. He needed to go to Samaria because there were people that nobody else wanted to reach out to. And that's, Jesus didn't allow cultural problems. He didn't allow culture to close doors to souls. And for us, I mean, I talk to anyone about the gospel. There's no person, no race, no gender. There is no one that I come across in day-to-day life that I'm not willing to talk to about the gospel. That's why do we start conversations like Jesus? Because the souls have value. They have value to God, and therefore they have value to us. And our mindset when we go out must be that we are willing to talk to anyone we come across about the gospel, no matter how much like us or different from us they are. You see, in verse 4 it says he needed to go through Samaria. We see two things there. First of all, his purpose, that he has a purpose for going. When Jesus went somewhere, his purpose was to seek and to save the lost. That's what it says in Luke chapter 19 and verse 10. Luke chapter 19 and verse 10. In Luke 19:10 it says that Jesus came to seek and save the lost. That's why he came to earth. But that's also why he went anywhere. That's why he went to any town. When he left his house, the purpose was to seek and save the lost. And so when we go anywhere, we might have a secondary purpose, right? I'm going to the store to buy butter so I can cook something. I'm going to town to get my car fixed. But our number one purpose is always, if I find someone that I think that I might could talk to start a conversation with, our number one purpose is always to seek and to save the lost. And that would include, the Bible says, every creature, all nations. That includes anybody and everybody that we might come across in this world. The second thing we see is that Jesus overcame fatigue. In verse 5 it says that he came to Samaria, a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, and it's near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And in verse 6 it says that that's where the well of Jacob was, and therefore Jesus, being wearied from his journey, thus sat at the well. And it was about the 6th hour of the day. And you know what the 6th hour means? That means it was noon. That means that the sun was right above in the highest point in the sky, and it was just beating down on him. He had been walking all day, and he was exhausted, and he was thirsty, and he was tired, and he seems to just want to kind of be alone and to kind of recuperate and have a drink and to rest. But when he sees the opportunity to talk to a soul that's lost, he seizes that opportunity even though he is so tired. I know that there are people in this congregation who struggle with prejudice, not because anyone's told me so, but just because every congregation, people have that struggle. That's just a part of life. But I know even more than that. There are people in this congregation who struggle with being tired, and that struggle with being weary, and struggle with the fatigue that life brings just from living and from being busy. Jesus knew what it was to be tired and to be fatigued and to be weary beyond the point of exhaustion. Jesus knew what that was like. But Jesus also knew that most great things are done by tired people. And that most great things are done by people who are just really tired. Remember what Paul said In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 9, Paul said, "Do not grow weary in doing good. And as we will sow today, we will reap great things tomorrow." Not grow weary in doing good. But sometimes we're tired, and an opportunity just presents itself. And I know I've done this. I can tell myself, here's the opportunity to talk to someone, but I'm just too tired. I'm just too disheartened about something. I'm just too disappointed. And so we let the opportunity go by. Seize that moment, even when you're tired. There is strength that God has given us. Hebrews 4:11 kind of puts it this way. In Hebrews 4:11, the idea is that heaven is the land of rest. America is a land of labor. Heaven is where we won't have to work anymore. But Jesus says in John chapter 9 and verse 4, Jesus says that he has to work while the day is still, because the night is coming when no man can work. This is the opportunity that we have to save souls. This is the opportunity that we have to do the work of God, to fulfill the purpose that he put us on this earth for. And so yes, sometimes we'll be tired like Jesus was. But when we see the opportunity, we're willing to say, I can rest in a few more minutes. I can talk to this person today. As we continue through this, we next get not just to the why, but more specifically the how. How are we going to start these conversations with people? We do it because we care about their souls, and so we're willing to overcome prejudice and fatigue in order to start conversations with people. But how matters as well. And it's about building friendships more than anything else in the beginning of these things. It says in verse 7, it says that a woman of Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink." Now this really was just kind of a way to start a friendly conversation. And the rest of the chapter is really just Jesus said, and then the woman said, and then Jesus said, and the woman said. They begin with a very friendly conversation. You think about what a drink of water is. Jesus has opened the conversation with a basic, relatable need. Everyone gets thirsty. Everyone is tired sometimes. Everyone has these basic, relatable needs. He found common ground. He found something. You couldn't find two more different people. In their culture, a Jewish man did not talk, and she'll say this in a minute, a Jewish man did not talk to a Samaritan woman. Jews hated Samaritans. Men thought lesser of women typically in their culture. They did not associate with one another. But they all had the same basic common needs. And that's what Jesus knew. He knew that if he could find some way that they had something in similar, there was a chance that they could have a conversation. I don't care who it is that you come across in life, no matter how different from you they are, there is something that you have in common. It doesn't have to be something real deep, or it doesn't have to be your biggest passion. You don't have to have the same favorite sports team or have the same hobbies or interests. There is something that you share in common with that person. That's the place to start. Because Jesus doesn't start with talks about religion. He doesn't open up with questions about the Bible. He opens with something she can relate to, something they can connect over. Now, he keeps the steering wheel through the conversation. He's going to stay at the steering wheel of the conversation, and we'll look more at that as we get further into this chapter. But his goal is to show her how much he cares. Rob, I'm going to read a quote from something that Rob left for us. It says, Rob says, "The question we are most often asked during our personal evangelism seminar is how to get into a Bible study." People just want to know. Maybe you feel like you know what you would say if you were in a Bible study. Some people do. Some people feel like they know what passages they would turn to. They know how to answer questions. The struggle is just how to get into a Bible study in the first place. How do I convince someone to sit down and look at God's words with me so that we can have a chance at saving their souls? That's the most common question he gets. And he says, ironically, our answer is, if you want a Bible study, don't ask. If you want a Bible study, don't ask for the Bible study. It doesn't mean you command it, right? It's not about asking. He says, if you ask a stranger for a Bible study, they are going to run for the hills. They are going to say no almost every time, because people don't care how much you know if they don't know how much you care about them. And I think we're probably going to hear that over and over again as we go through these things. That is an important part of what we're doing, is letting people see we really do care about them. I have no doubt the people in this congregation, we care about people in this world. We care about the people in our communities, our neighbors and our friends who don't yet know the gospel. The trouble is sometimes we're not sure how to show them we care about them. And that's part of what we'll be learning here, is how to show people, how to overwhelm people with how much we care about them. And so we seize the moment even when we're tired, and we begin with a friendly conversation. Next we see in verse 8, he says that his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Jesus and this woman were in a public place, but they were alone, and there was no one listening. And that's important that we begin with private conversation, that it's a friendly conversation, but that we're showing people that we're trustworthy, that we're not going to embarrass them, we're not going to point out their sins in front of other people, because salvation is very personal, isn't it? Whenever we're talking to someone about their souls, many times we'll end up having to deal with sin in their life. Nobody wants to do that publicly. Whenever we're talking to people about their souls, sometimes it will just reveal to them their spiritual condition as we're doing the Bible study. And nobody wants to have that done openly. Now, when we're in the church, public sin often has to be dealt with publicly. But that's for church members. That's not for the people of the world. Personal Bible study and evangelism is done privately. It's essential that it's done privately so that people feel safe enough to really listen to what the Bible is saying, so that people feel secure enough to really consider and open up to the Bible. This is what was done through the Bible. You remember Acts 18 and verse 26? In Acts 18 and in verse 26, Aquila and Priscilla heard Apollos teach a good lesson, but an incorrect lesson. And so they took him aside. It says they took him aside and they explained to him more clearly the way. They showed him what he was lacking, where he needed to grow privately on the side of things. You can imagine someone like Apollos, who had not even been baptized in the name of Jesus for the remission of sins, how he might have responded if they had done that openly in front of everyone. He wasn't trying to cause problems, he just didn't know better. So they took him aside and showed him the way. Let's follow Jesus by first having private conversations before we move into personal Bible studies. And then we see in verse 9 it says that the woman of Samaria said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" For the Jews had no association, they had no dealings with the Samaritans. Like we said, the Jews hated the Samaritans. And really, you think about what she's doing there. He just asked her for a drink of water. And what she did is she pointed her finger at him and said, "Why do you hate me so much? Why are your people so ugly to my people?" And really, this is not that uncommon that people do this whenever we talk to people and they find out that we're a part of the Church of Christ. Have you ever received the question, "Doesn't your church believe you're the only ones going to heaven?" Have you ever heard someone say, "Well, my childhood friend went to the Church of Christ and they told me that I'm going to hell"? And you think, well, why are you telling me this right now? There's a number of reasons why someone might say that, but it can be awkward, it can be uncomfortable, it can be a little bit infuriating sometimes, the way that people bring those things up suddenly. And Jesus was very careful not to let offensive statements get in the way of his purpose. He had one goal, and that was to see the salvation of this woman. And so he's just going to let those offensive statements go by. He's not going to get caught up trying to debate or argue. He's not going to defend himself. He's not going to put himself first. He's going to let it go by. Do you remember what Paul did in Acts chapter 18 and verse 26? In Acts chapter 18 and verse 26, it says, Paul went into Athens, and he saw all of the idols. And it says his spirit was stirred within him. He was upset by what he saw. He had big emotions about what he saw. But when it came time to talk to people about it, he just let it go by. And in fact, he found something good to say about it. He said, I see that you are very religious. He found a way to find some common ground there, something good to say, instead of criticizing them for what they just didn't know not to do. They just didn't know better yet. And so he was willing to let those things come by. I think sometimes it's not even directly about the Church of Christ. Sometimes it's just in private conversation. People just say things that upset us. We're having a nice conversation with someone, and then suddenly they start talking about their favorite political candidate, and it's not the one that we would support. And so suddenly we feel the need to jump in and to say, well, I don't like that person, or I wouldn't do this. Let it go by. Our goal is not to get into these debates and arguments with people. Our goal is to get people into Bible studies. And so if we are working to be a friend, we're working to not argue. We're working to find something good to say, regardless of whatever it is that they're saying about us. Proverbs 15 and verse 1. In Proverbs 15 and verse 1, it says, a soft answer turns away wrath. A harsh word stirs up anger. Let the world be harsh toward us. Let them say offensive things about us to our faces. We don't have to be like that. Because we know the truth. We have the example of Jesus. We know the way. We can reply with a soft answer. We can reply with something good to say, something that builds bridges instead of causes divides. Find the common ground. Let the offensive statements go by. Focus on that one thing. I want us to be friends so that we can sit down and look at the Bible and figure out just what God says about salvation together. And these are the 5, this is just, there's 17 of them, but we're just starting with these 5 today. These 5 ways to start the conversation. Now next week we'll get more into the meat of the conversation and how to move these things, whether it's in one conversation or over the course of time, how to move these things closer to the Bible study with every conversation that we have. So we'll be picking this up next week, and from here, from starting the conversation, we're going to be helping people, we're going to help point people to the Savior, which is what Jesus does next as well. And we'll look at that next week. But today's 5 points we can put into practice as we follow Jesus. And that's, everything that Rob presented to us last week is found in biblical principles. We wouldn't have asked him here if what he was doing wasn't found in the Bible. And it's the best plan in the world is not really the best plan if it isn't found in the Bible. He has offered us a plan that Jesus himself used. And that's all we really want, is we want to follow Jesus, to do things the way that Jesus did things. And that's what we've been offered today. Jesus was focused. He had a mission. He had a goal for this woman and for every person he encountered. And we can make that our personal goal in every person we encounter by mimicking and following it just exactly the way that Jesus did. That is our mission and goal. Now, we're not going to offer the invitation just yet, because first, the elders have sort of an assignment to help us put these 5 principles into class. The elders have an assignment for us that will help us to follow our Master Jesus as we learn to evangelize the people that are around us. Johnny's going to come up and tell us about that. Just a brief sort of little moment here to talk about this assignment. And then we'll offer the invitation and move on to the Lord's Supper, which is really the point of why we've gathered this morning. And so let's take these 5 principles and try to put them into practice. And Johnny is going to help us to do that now.
Check it. I'm going to need a little help with Scott's going to help, and I think Jacob's going to help us here. Just pass out a few things. We're going to pass out these bookmark cards, and he mentioned it. If you were here, he mentioned that we're going to ask you to write down 10 names on these cards. Someone's local that you know is lost, that you care enough about them to write their name down. And we're going to give you a few minutes after we pass these cards out. We're going to give you about a minute to do as much as you can in in about a minute. But your assignment for the week is before we come back next Sunday to have 10 names on your card. We all know 10 people around us that we care about their salvation. We just do. But we may have been too afraid to approach them, too afraid to say anything to them. But these are the people that we're gonna ask you to write down. So make sure everyone that's junior high age and up get one of these cards. There's pens in every pew in front of you to write with. If you would take just a second, we can get them all passed out. We're going to take a minute for you to write down as many as you can in a minute of names. And you should have been thinking about this. If you were here, he talked about this quite a bit. And it's been going through my mind all week long. Who would I put on my card? Who are the ones that I'm most concerned about saving their soul that I know is lost? That's local. We have people we have in-laws, we have cousins, we have family members that live away from us, but we can't hardly do a Bible study with them. Now, when we're with them, we can talk with them, but these are people around here. I don't care if you live in Longview, Diana, Ore City, Harleton, around here, Gilmer. There are people around here that's in our local community. We have people from all those places that come to church here with us, that worship with us. So it doesn't have to be just in the Diana community itself. It's just those around us. So once we get these passed out, everybody got a card. I want you to take about a minute and write down as many names on that card as you can in a minute. And then take these home during the week and finish filling out your card. All right? Take a minute and do that. About a minute. This could be a classmate at school. This could be a coworker at where you work. This could be a neighbor that's around you. Those are some ideas to think about. Put these in your Bible and please bring them back next Sunday. We're going to be working on this list for a while. So put these in your Bible, bring them back next Sunday, and we'll have a different assignment that we're going to ask you for next week. So please keep these with you, and we'll do this again next week. Something else we want to caution you about. I know if you were here, everyone got a book, a study guide that he went through as we were going through the seminar. Inside that book was a Bible study. Those 3 pamphlets that were in there. Please try your best not to give that to someone without going into a Bible study with them. It's not designed for them to do as a correspondence course. That's not what it's designed for. It's designed for someone to sit down with them and go through the study with them. Remember the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8 and starting in 31? What was the Ethiopian eunuch doing? He was traveling on the road and he was reading from Isaiah. And the question he asked Philip was, how do I know what I'm reading if I don't know about it? That's what that Bible study is designed for, someone to sit down with them and take them through the Bible, through what's important in that study, not for them to do on their own. Because a lot of times, I'll sit down and do a questionnaire right quick and just put it aside and forget about it. That's not what it's about. Relationships. Remember, you're trying to build a relationship with somebody that you really, really care about and is concerned about. So try and restrain yourself from giving those to someone just for a questionnaire for them just to fill out. It's designed to sit down with someone and study, because most of us have grown up in the church and know quite a bit about Bibles already. They may not know anything. So they need a guide through that, and that's what the Bible studies are designed for. So remember that. We always offer the invitation. If anyone needs to put Christ in on baptism at this time, we can do that at this time. Also, if you have a concern that you would like to bring to the church, maybe we can pray for you, we can study with you, or whatever we need to do with that. At this time, we will ask Steve to go ahead and lead us in